YouTube, how's it going? Welcome back to another video. Today's going to be kind of a shorter video because pretty much all I'm doing is showing you guys how to install the glowshift fuel pressure gauge inside of the cabin of your car. And that's going to be replacing the aftermarket fuel gauge that we have on the regulator up in the engine bay. What this will allow me to do is pretty much look at how much fuel pressure I have on the fuel rails, in the regulator the entire time from inside of the car right next to my boost gauge. Imagine you have your boost gauge, for example, up front. You don't know how much boost you're making unless you have a camera up there. So I like to have all of my data right in front of me, so especially while I'm driving, I want to see if this drops to zero. The car's probably going to turn off, but we can monitor and day log and do all sorts of testing and find out what the problems are with the car with the gauge inside of it. So really simple install. Pretty much all we got to do is take off the old one, put in the new glowshift pressure gauge wires and stuff like that, and we should be good to go. You can see my old fuel pressure gauge is just kind of obviously in the engine bay, so really all I'm going to do is take an 11mm wrench right over here, just kind of I already kind of loosened it for a TikTok video, but we're just gonna go ahead and take it all out and then replace it with, this is what came in the glowshift kit. You got all this wiring, you got the actual gauge itself, a little AC pod cover thing, and then this right here is what we're gonna be needing. It is the fuel pressure sensor, and that connects to the wire, and then the readout goes on the gauge. Really simple stuff. Let me go ahead and pull this out. Pull this out right over here, just like that. I'm actually gonna go ahead and do that. Make sure that you don't have fuel pressure, obviously, before you pull that. You can see we have just a little bit dribbling out. So I'm gonna try to hurry and get this done. Really simple stuff. This is the old gauge. I'm gonna go ahead and keep this just in case I wanna move it to somewhere else on the fuel rail. But let's go ahead and put this one back on there. And just like that, we replaced that old gauge with the new sensor right over here. It's pretty much hand tight, hand snug, so I'm gonna go ahead and get a wrench and then cinch it down just a little bit, make sure it's snug, not too tight. Then I'm gonna run the wire pretty much from here, following this. Ignore these people, I'm not sponsored by them anymore. And then it's gonna go inside. There's a little hole, you can might be able to see it, little hole that goes into the firewall. And then I'll be showing you guys where I'm gonna mount the gauges inside of the car in just a second. So let me go ahead and tighten this down and get that wire loom connected, show you guys where I'm gonna put it. As you guys can see, we have the new fuel pressure sensor hooked up to the regulator. I've got to put all this wiring away with some zip ties, kind of make it neat, nice and tidy. We're going to run it through that firewall hole, and then I'm going to show you guys where I'm going to put it inside. Really simple stuff. So now that we have the wiring pretty much all tucked away, I zip tied it around the actual fitting. You can kind of see it right there. And it just goes up here, zip ties to the strut, to the brake thingy over there, and then all the way through. So it's pretty good. It's not going to go anywhere. The wind isn't going to destroy it. And now you can probably see it on the floor right here. This is what we're going to be using to plug into the actual fuel gauge. And I do have a custom pillar mount coming soon. I didn't pay $200 for the one that goes with the Mustang. I paid $20 for the universal one. So we're going to be taking this out. I'm going to figure out something with the speaker. We'll probably remove it. I'm going to go ahead and put 2 gauge pods right over here. That'll be a whole separate video. And that's where the boost one right there and the fuel pressure one are going to sit, so it's easy access. It looks really cool, really nice, and I get to keep all the AC in the middle because 2 of the 3 gauges being used up is not really fun for the AC. I'm not gonna lie. Inside the car, I'm gonna put the gauges right up here in that little pod. I do have to wait for that pillar to come in, but for now we got the fuel, we got the boost. However, this does need a power and ground, and unfortunately I don't feel like doing a bunch of wiring right now, so I'm going to be using the one from the boost gauge because it uses the same wires for pretty much the lighting and to turn it on and to give it power. I just have to pull it out of that, which is what I was going to do anyways, to put it up there. So give me a second. We do have it connected. We do have some type of fuel pressure because I did prime the system. I'm just going to go ahead and remove this. We're going to be using the one on the back just to test it, just to see, and then we should be good to go. It should work. Let me go ahead and show you guys that. This is going to be a pain. Ooh, there we go. As you can see, we got about 10, 11, 15 PSI of fuel pressure just from priming it. And it glows red, but you can change the different colors. I just don't have the wiring all set up. I don't know if you guys can see by that little video that I filmed in portrait mode, but the fuel pressure sensor does work. I just have to go ahead and do a bunch of wiring. I'm probably going to wait until the gauge pillar comes in, so that's probably going to be the next clip. Probably going to be a couple days from now when I'm recording this. But we're going to get that gauge pillar set up. We're going to get all of the wiring right over there set up for both of the gauges, the boost pressure and the fuel gauge. That's all going to be in the gauge. It's all going to be wired, tucked nicely, and I'm very excited to go ahead and do all that, but unfortunately there's not too much space in the garage. I don't want to pull the car out right now because it is probably going to rain, and if you guys can't tell, we don't have the hood. The hood pins are coming in soon. I'm gonna go ahead and finish up that wiring. We're gonna wait for that gauge pillar pod to come in. And then right after that, I should have everything wired up. Should be able to show you guys exactly how it works, all the different modes, all the different colors. We are following the instructions pretty spot on. It is a pretty simple install. However, one thing I will complain about is that the wiring for to turn on the gauge and to actually have it work is way too short. You got maybe a foot of wiring when you have 16 feet of wiring from the engine bay, which obviously that works, but just kind of like balance it out. Now I have to go ahead and buy more wire, splice things, put fuses. It's the next day. The gauge pod still hasn't come in, but I just decided to go ahead and tackle this. I moved the car out of the garage, so I finally have some space. I got an awesome toolbox. All my tools are pretty much within arm's reach, so I'm very excited about that. But as you can see, we removed the pillar over here. Now I was thinking of splicing into some of these wires over here, but I don't really need to, because I'm going to be using the one for the headlight, rear view mirror over here. And as you can see, I've already kind of spliced in. I have a power and a ground. Now for those of you that are interested, it is the furthest left from the first row. So it is the black and blue wire for the ground, kind of blurry. And the very last wire is a red and yellow. And on this bottom row over here is the first one, and then the very last one on the bottom row, if you have the clip facing like this. Hopefully that makes sense, but this is an ignition controlled turn on, so there's no power going to it until you press ignition, which is exactly what I want. Unfortunately, with the wiring for the gauge, you have 4 over here. The orange one is for the headlamp, so I guess when your headlights turn on, it's supposed to dim. I guess I won't have that feature because I really don't care to have a dim switch thing with the headlights, because this car is controlled by a BCM, so I'd have to splice the wire all the way to the front of the headlight. I'm not trying to do all that because I really don't care. So what I'm going to be doing is splicing the 12 volt constant with a 12 volt power. So unfortunately it won't have the memory, so every time I turn on the gauges it's going to be set to a certain color, which I don't really mind right now. I'm guessing I could find a 12 volt constant around here, or splice it into the fuse box like I'd have with the boost gauge. Unfortunately, I'm not trying to do all that, so we're just going to be doing we're going to be splicing the power. We're going to be splicing the 12 volt constant and the power to one switch. I'm not terribly worried about that, but we're going to be routing all of the wiring over here, and we're just going to have it kind of hanging until that gauge pod comes in. And that's just how I'm going to do it for now, but we're just going to get it temporarily working. So I'm going to keep splicing these wires. I'm going to tuck them all up, hide them underneath the headliner right over here, and just run all the wiring over there. So we can temporarily have that fuel pressure gauge working, and then I'm going to probably move the boost gauge as well, because I want all 3 of my AC vents, if that makes sense. So obviously it's a little bit later in the night, but I just finished up with the wiring. I'm not putting the mirror back on yet because I do need some type of sealant to make sure that it sticks on there. But if you look right over here, we got all of the gauges pretty much ready to go, and when I turn on the power, you can see the boost gauge doesn't do that little twirly thing, but you can see the fuel pressure pretty much at 40. All of them work. The boost gauge is all hooked up. All of the lights change. I kind of like the multicolor. There's one that changes the modes. I don't know which one it is, but as you can see, we got both gauges right there. I do have the pillar pod that still needs to be connected, but these gauges are going to sit pretty much right here and right here. And it's gonna look really, really nice. So now YouTube, it is the next day, and I told you that the gauge pillar was gonna come in. Honestly, I thought it was gonna be a couple more days, but as you can see, this little piece, I just have it taped on temporarily because I did line it up in the car. This piece cost me $20, and I'm just gonna show you why I'm not gonna spend $200 on it, and $20 is just fine for me. So if you're looking at this gauge pillar, you can see I've just kind of got it taped off, held in position here. And if you look inside of there, I don't know if you can really see it, but there is a speaker. It is the tweeter for the S550 Mustang. Usually sits right here, and you can, obviously it's for music and stuff like that. Now I really don't care. I'm probably gonna just leave it plugged in and kind of leave the gauges like this. And just for now, because I don't want to use a bunch of Bondo and make this all like look super pretty, I'm just gonna use a couple of sheet metal screws. I'm gonna spray paint them black, and I'm gonna pretty much tack everything onto here just so that it stays. I'm not really too worried. It kind of follows the contour, and I feel like with the sheet metal screws, it's gonna adhere to it a little bit more. Now, if I wanted to fix this up and make this 100%, I would use some Bondo or something like that and kind of go all around the edges and get this thing to stick on there, but I'm not terribly worried. As long as it works and it's secure, I'm not too worried about looks. Obviously, there's no hood on the car. There's a bunch of other stuff that I have to worry about, and I just want to get this to work and look kind of cool. So let's go ahead and sheet metal screw everything in. I'll probably have to drill some holes first to kind of reach or have the wires go through. So let's go ahead and destroy this. So I've got it pretty much, I'm gonna say temporarily, but it's probably gonna be permanent. I went ahead and spray painted the bolts here that I used to secure it down. You can kind of see it maybe. It really doesn't look the best, but inside of the car, I think it looks kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie, it's very sturdy, very stable. You can see I drilled holes through it to stick the wires through. Now the last step is to go ahead and put it in the car, put the gauges in there, and it should be a completed install. Now we're inside of the car. You can see I kind of pretty much finished it up. I buttoned it up. Now I do have a piece of tape here because there's a little gap and I'm not really a big fan of that. Obviously there's sheet metal screws and all that, but it's very sturdy. It's all the way pushed in there. We got the gauges pretty much centered. And now when I press the ignition button, any day now, this is the newer gauge, so it does the little all the way around. You can see we're reading the fuel pressure here. We also got the boost gauge all connected and set up, and obviously you guys can change the colors. Really simple stuff, really clean to install, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Honestly, I'm not gonna spend $240 for the actual gauge pillar pod because that's ridiculous. I'm just gonna spend $20, and it's a freaking race car. So now I'm gonna go ahead and pull the car inside of the garage. Now that we got the gauges working, that's pretty much a simple tutorial on how to do it. I haven't connected this in yet, so I don't bother plugging it in, but zero issues so far. It looks really freaking good, and I'm excited to be able to data log, and now I drive a literal spaceship. So that was pretty much how to install the glowshift dual gauge pillar pod. It was only the $20 one, it wasn't the $240 one. Obviously the $240 one would look a lot better and wouldn't have the rivets that are spray painted black and anything like that. But I'm not gonna spend that kind of money because that's like 6 tanks of E85, plus for $20 it does its job. It looks how it's supposed to look, and it honestly, like I said, it does its job, so I really don't care. Anyways, go ahead and pick it up. There's links down below, everything like that. Check out the gauges. There's a bunch of videos and stuff like that. If you don't really like the longer form content, go ahead and check out my social medias. Everything is down below. Personally, I think that this thing looks absolutely sick. I've got a bunch of gauges on the side. I'm gonna have another gauge over here to show me live data, like NOx sensing and stuff like that. And probably an ethanol sensor, all types of data and information, which is super useful, especially on really expensive cars like this, because I don't want it to blow up. That would be the last thing that I would want to happen. So we're trying to keep this thing safe, and all the data you can use, the better. Anyways, if you guys liked the video, go ahead and drop a like, comment, subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching, and peace out. See you guys in the next video.